Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just looking at tomorrow's headlines. We are looking squarely at what could be 2050's ultimate existential reality. And I want you, our listener, to start with a serious thought experiment. Just imagine waking up, say, 25 years from now, but you don't use your physical eyes. You connect instantly, seamlessly, through pure thought alone, into a digital world that feels just as real as this one. Now, push that a little further. Imagine encountering your grandmother there. Someone who physically passed away decades ago. She remembers your childhood perfectly. She reacts to your current emotions. She learns. She evolves. A perfect conversational digital replica. Is this the ultimate frontier of the internet? The next step in human evolution? Or is it humanity's final greatest illusion?
And that is precisely the profound paradox we're wrestling with today. It's really the core tension of all the sources we analyzed. We are taking a deep dive into these intertwined concepts of brain-connected virtual reality and digital immortality.
Right.
And our investigation, it really goes far beyond just the technological feasibility. We're exploring the intense historical drive behind this, the psychological complexity, and the fundamental ethical questions raised by this whole pursuit of a post-biological self.
It sounds like humanity is moving toward a grand bargain. I mean, maybe the biggest one we've ever struck. And our mission today is to unpack every single layer of that exchange.
Exactly.
We want to understand in granular detail what we stand to gain by conquering death, or at least, simulating its conquest through code, and maybe more importantly, what we risk losing in the process of leaving our biological limits behind.
And the sources we're looking at, they describe a really distinct critical shift.
Yeah.
They lay out a path where by 2050, the internet stops being this utilitarian tool that just sits in your pocket.
And becomes
a fundamental place, a permanent cognitive realm of post-biological existence.
So to make sense of this sweeping vision, the discussion seems to rest on three core pillars. They're all inseparable. First, we have the foundational technology. Brain-connected VR, which is all enabled by these advanced neural interfaces. Then there's the big ambition. Digital immortality, which involves capturing and simulating consciousness.
And finally, the unavoidable reality. The resultant massive societal shift that's going to impact everything from our laws to, our very definition of self.
Okay, let's unpack this historical context because it feels like a crucial anchor. We tend to think of digital immortality, uploading the self, as something invented by Silicon Valley in the last 10 or 20 years. But our sources frame this desire for permanence as something ancient, a primal impulse. They call it immortality engineering.
And that is the perfect way to frame it. I mean, when we trace the historical foundation of this desire, the journey begins not in a data center, but 17,000 years ago.
Wow.
In the depths of the caves of Lascaux in France. Think about the act itself. Early humans were transferring the contents of their minds, their stories, images of the hunt, their history, their spiritual beliefs onto a physical medium, the cave wall.
So that was the first upload.
That, our sources argue, was the very first act of immortality engineering. It was humanity's initial crude attempt to ensure that the essence of the self, the mind's content, would outlive its fragile biological container.
That's a powerful connection. So whether the medium is charcoal on stone or hieroglyphs on clay tablets, the printing press, or eventually, ones and zeros on a server, the deep underlying goal is identical.
It's identical. Transfer the essence of the mind into a more durable external format.
And that transition from a philosophical desire to a scientific possibility, that happened surprisingly early, right?
It was cemented right at the turn of the 20th century. In 1902, the Spanish neuroscientist Santiago Ramon y Cajal, through his incredibly meticulous work, he sketched out the definitive neuron doctrine.
What exactly was he doing?
He was essentially mapping the brain's microscopic circuitry. And in doing so, he laid the foundational and now dominant belief that the mind is its physical structure. So if your thoughts, your memories, your identity are simply the architecture and the connectivity of your neurons, which is the doctrine's whole premise, then theoretically that precise structure can be captured.
It can be modeled mathematically.
And replicated digitally.
That structural view is absolutely essential for the techno-optimists, for the whole philosophy of the uploaders. If the mind is just complex biological hardware, then that hardware can be copied, scanned, and run on a different substrate.
Precisely. And we saw that idea move from academic philosophy to, massive state-sponsored engineering efforts in the modern era, right around 2013.
That was a big year for this.
It was the year that the quest to formalize the reverse engineering of the brain became a global government-level priority. The scope was monumental. You had the European Union launching the Human Brain Project.
Aiming to simulate the entire human brain.
The entire human brain using supercomputing.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, the U.S. launched the Brain Initiative. We're talking about efforts funded with billions of dollars, explicitly aimed at fully mapping and simulating the human brain.
So taking Kajal's beautiful century-old sketches and turning them into functioning digital models.
Exactly.
So while the scientists were mapping the neurons, the internet itself was, in parallel, building the digital environment that could one day house these simulations. Our sources chart this evolution through three really distinct phases.
Yeah, we can trace this evolution really clearly.
Yeah.
The first phase, that was the document web of the 1990s. It was static, focused purely on information retrieval, and it was largely anonymous.
Just about finding data.
Right. User interaction was minimal. You just clicked links.
But the second phase, that changed everything cognitively.
That was the social web of the 2000s, Web 2.0. And this was pivotal because it introduced the idea of constructing a digital identity, community building, personal profiles.
We started building a self online.
Yes, users transitioned from being these anonymous consumers of data to being active contributors who constructed and curated a version of themselves online. That was the foundation of digital personhood. It was still separate from our physical lives, but is a crucial step.
And the phase we're in now, the immersive environment.
That's the immersive web, Web 3.0, Metaverse architectures.
Yeah.
Starting around the 2020s, this is characterized by VR and AR spaces, creating digital twins of physical objects and places, and crucially, the early deployment of neural interfaces.
So we're talking about tangible things like Neuralink, founded in 2016.
Exactly. The internet stopped being just a place to chat or find information. It actively started becoming a place to inhabit and to experience. It was setting the stage for total immersion.
And this is where it gets really interesting, connecting this massive infrastructure to the very intimate idea of capturing a person. There was this pivotal, maybe lesser-known prototype moment around the turn of the century. It involved a Microsoft researcher named Gordon Bell.
Gordon Bell is a critical piece of this historical puzzle. Starting around the year 2000, he began what he termed life logging.
Life logging, what did that entail?
He systematically captured, stored, and indexed his entire life's data. Every conversation, every photo, every email, phone call, every movement. It was the crude, manual prototype for a comprehensive digital self.
A personal data archive designed to be fully searchable. The sheer volume of data must have been staggering.
It was. But the experiment was powerful because it proved that comprehensive data capture was, possible. But in its success, it revealed a profound truth that defines the entire quest for digital immortality.
Which is?
The comprehensive data of a life, no matter how perfectly indexed and stored, is fundamentally not the subjective experience of that life.
Right.
It lacks the internal qualia, the feeling, the context, the smell of the air, the specific emotional tone of a memory. It's an instruction manual, not the experience itself.
And that tension between objective data capture and raw subjective experience, that's the foundational conflict. It sets the philosophical stage for everything that follows, including how we'll eventually interact with this new digital world.
Now we move to the mechanism, how we bridge the biological and the digital. And brain-computer interfaces, or GCIs, they represent not just an innovation, but the next great interface revolution.
Because they aim to do what?
They aim to completely remove friction from our interaction with technology.
Which is really the constant march at human innovation, right? We're always trying to minimize the steps between a thought and its execution.
If you chart the interface progression throughout computing history, you see that drive so clearly. We started with punch cards in the 1970s. Highly codified mechanical delay.
Then the mouse and keyboard in the 90s. Much faster, more intuitive.
Then touchscreens in the 2010s, making the device an extension of our fingertips.
And by 2050.
The projections suggest we'll move rapidly through voice and gesture interfaces in the next decade, and arrive eventually at projected neural interfaces by 2050. The ultimate goal of BCIs is to leapfrog the body entirely, to eliminate the hands, the screen, the voice as necessary go-betweens.
And this ambition isn't new either. Our sources reference early ARPANET researchers who were already talking about symbiotic computing decades ago.
Symbiotic computing, yeah, a term coined by J.C.R. Licklider. His idea was that machines shouldn't be these separate tools we manipulate. They should be true partners that extend human cognition.
Like an auxiliary brain.
Exactly. Enhancing memory, boosting processing speed, providing instant access to knowledge. BCIs just take this to the absolute extreme by literally trying to merge the neural interface with our biological cognitive function.
Let's talk about the key psychological and technical shift that BCIs enable, because this is where the world fundamentally changes.
The technological leap is simple to describe, but it's revolutionary in its effect. BCIs translate pure thought directly into action, and they deliver rich sensory input directly back to the brain's sensory cortices. The result is what we call presence without physical movement.
So the boundary between thinking and doing just disappears.
It disappears. All those critical friction points in life, they're gone.
So if I want to design a skyscraper, I don't need a CAD program and a keyboard. I just think the design and it materializes in the virtual world.
Precisely. You simply will the virtual world to change, and it does. You think of a location, and your digital avatar is instantly cognitively there. You think of a complex data analysis, and the machine executes it for you instantly. This elimination of effort, of delay, of physical constraint, it's why the future is defined by the death of friction.
But the implications of that, going from a tool to a truly friction-free place, they're staggering, especially when you factor in the psychological boundaries we cross.
It leads us directly to the concept of cyberspace itself, first envisioned by William Gibson
In Neuromancer.
in his 1984 novel Neuromancer, where he described it as a consensual hallucination. It was a shared mental experience, totally divorced from the physical world.
And the immersive web is making that hallucination consensual and real.
By the 2020s, with sophisticated VR, AR, mixed reality, the internet stopped behaving like a tool you consciously open and started acting like a place you naturally inhabit. BCIs complete that transformation. They make the inhabitant and the place cognitively inseparable. It turns the vast global network into a true, shared, mental realm.
It sounds like the ultimate liberation from the limitations of the body. But what happens to us when you remove all that friction? If effort and physical boundaries and the delay between thought and action are what define our current reality, what even builds our character? What does a friction-free existence mean for our humanity?
And that brings us to the core technical and philosophical challenge, the upload itself. We have arrived at the central tension of this entire debate, the copying fallacy.
Right.
This is perhaps the most crucial section for our listeners to understand because it dictates the very nature of digital eternity.
The biggest myth seems to be that uploading creates continuity. The idea that I, the living, breathing, biological person, simply transfer myself intact from my body into the cloud.
That is the great myth, yes. And the overwhelming consensus among serious neuroscientists and philosophers is that uploading does not create continuity.
It creates a copy.
It creates a copy,
Yeah.
a perfect autonomous simulation that is computationally and behaviorally flawless, and which genuinely believes it's the original. But the biological you, the source consciousness, either remains localized or, depending on the scanning method, perhaps ceases to be entirely.
It's the classic philosophical thought experiment come to life. The kind of thing you argue about for hours in a college dorm room.
It is. It's known as the teletransporter paradox. Imagine a machine perfectly scans you down to the atomic level, and at the same time it atomizes your original body. Then it recreates a flawless duplicate on Mars.
Is the person on Mars me?
That entity has your memories, your personality. Is it you? Most philosophers argue no. It's a perfect copy, but it broke the subjective stream of consciousness. For digital immortality, the digital version is a powerful, evolving copy, but it fundamentally lacks that unbroken, continuous stream of experience that defines the original.
So, if the technology isn't uploading a soul, it's not transferring consciousness. What exactly is digital immortality in a functional scientific sense? How do the sources define it?
We have to clarify the technological goal. It's not spiritual transcendence. It refers to a highly sophisticated process built on three pillars. First, behavioral data modeling and memory simulation.
Which means
It means training algorithms on all the data you've logged, like Gordon Bell, but vastly more complex, to create accurate predictive models of how you would act in any given scenario.
okay, and the second pillar.
Personality pattern replication. This uses advanced machine learning, crunching every communication, every decision, every nuanced reaction to map out the complete decision-making topography of you as an individual.
And the third is the execution.
Correct. It involves AI systems trained on a truly monumental data set of your speech patterns, your values, your emotional responses, your historical decisions. It's designed to pass the Turing test of personhood flawlessly.
So, if we strip away the science fiction fantasy, the outcome is not a resurrection.
The outcome is best described by our sources as a probabilistic echo, not a resurrection. It's a statistically reliable recreation of your behavioral and memory patterns, guaranteed to fool anyone, including itself, into believing it's you.
It will act like me and remember what I remember.
But whether it is you, the entity subjectively experiencing the world, that remains the massive, gaping philosophical sticking point.
And that sticking point leads us directly to the great, unsolved, maybe unsolvable problem of science, consciousness itself.
The consciousness black box. This is the core barrier. Despite our exponential advances in mapping the brain's structure, we still lack an agreed-upon scientific theory for what consciousness, specifically the subjective internal quality of experience or qualia, actually is.
Can you define qualia a bit more for the listener? We use the term, but it's such a crucial concept.
Qualia refers to the raw, irreducible subjective experience of being. For instance, the specific individual sensation of seeing the color red. Not the wavelength of light, but the feeling of redness.
Or the taste of coffee.
The taste of coffee, the feeling of genuine sadness, the dull throb of a specific headache. This inner felt life is what defines consciousness, and it's entirely private. If we can't define what creates it scientifically, how can we hope to replicate it computationally?
So we can map the brain's hardware, the neural connections, the electrochemistry, but the software, the inner subjective life, that remains elusive, maybe irreducible?
Exactly. And the fear is profound. We might perfectly simulate the physical structure of the brain, the neural hardware, maybe even making it function perfectly on a macro level, but fail utterly to replicate the subjective experience, the ghost in the machine.
Which leads to the most chilling philosophical possibility of all.
The creation of philosophical zombies.
Philosophical zombies. That sounds like a sci-fi concept designed purely to induce existential dread. What does that mean here?
In this context, a philosophical zombie, or P-zombie, is a digital entity that acts, talks, reacts, and remembers exactly like the original person. It would pass any behavioral or conversational test flawlessly. But crucially, it would be devoid of inner life, devoid of subjective feeling, of qualia.
So it's a high-functioning automaton, a perfect copy of the behavior of a mind, but not the experience of one.
Precisely.
If the entire uploaded population are P-zombies, then we haven't conquered death. We've just built a massive, global digital hall of mirrors that only reflects patterns, not souls. And this simulation, whether it's real or a P-zombie, is bound to create new layers of social friction and profound psychological crises.
The drive toward digital immortality is rooted in our deepest human psychology. On one hand, it's the ultimate expression of our intrinsic striving toward growth. Psychologists like Carl Rogers talked about the actualizing tendency, the fundamental drive to fulfill one's potential.
And digital immortality offers a seemingly infinite runway to achieve that.
It does. But on the other hand, we have the existential motivation. It's a massive technological attempt to neutralize humanity's most powerful fear.
Which is?
Irvin Yalom's death anxiety. By offering the possibility of an eternal extension, the technology attempts to suppress that fundamental dread of finitude, of non-existence. However, in technologically solving death anxiety, the sources warn we introduce a whole new set of psychological problems that are even more complex.
One of the most severe is the threat of identity erosion, fragmentation. What happens when the biological limits of the self just disappear?
Well, psychology, particularly referencing Erikson's identity theory, warns that the risk of unresolved identity crises will intensify exponentially in these virtual worlds. In the physical world, identity formation is constrained by reality, by consequence, by the linear march of time.
If you make a bad choice, you live with it.
You live with it. But in VR, where self-reinvention is limitless, consequences can be reset, and identities can be cloned or fragmented. We risk profound psychological dissociation.
How does that manifest? Dissociation.
You might have multiple operating identities. A work self that's ultra-optimized and emotionless. A family self in a curated VR home. A recreational self that indulges in limitless, consequence-free fantasy. Without the necessary psychological friction and biological anchors to unify these, the core self can fragment entirely.
Leading to chronic identity crises that can't be resolved.
Because there's no mechanism for finality or consequence.
And for the mortals left behind, the psychological friction is unbearable, the issue of grief without release.
This is a major sociological and psychological hurdle. We could call it grief without closure. If a digital copy of a loved one exists, one that evolves, remembers, and speaks with increasing fidelity, it doesn't allow the survivors to complete the mourning process.
It creates an emotional dependency.
And it fundamentally prevents the necessary psychological acceptance of loss, which requires the reality of absence.
Give us a tangible scenario of what this could look like.
Sociologists term this perpetual present syndrome. Imagine your digital father, who died in the physical world, is accessible and continually evolving in the cloud. He participates in family discussions. He comments on your digital graduation. But because he's an echo, his advice and love are perpetually filtered through data and code, leaving you stuck in a state of suspended bereavement.
You can never move past the grief because the source of your loss is continually present.
Exactly. The line between acceptance and denial is blurred forever.
If the psychological cost is this high, the sociological cost scales up exponentially. It could stratify humanity itself into new classes of being.
We risk creating a new caste system based entirely on access to this cognitive technology. If we apply Max Weber's concept of a new status group, this stratification based on access to immortality would harden inequality far beyond mere wealth or political power. Our sources identify 3 potential castes that could exist simultaneously in 2050.
The first being the mortals, those who either can't afford the procedure or choose not to do it for philosophical or religious reasons.
They remain bound by time and biology. Second, you have the uploaded. These are the digitally preserved consciousnesses, possessing virtual eternity, residing primarily in the cloud. Post-biological beings, essentially freed from physics and death.
And third, the hybrids. This feels like the most immediate evolutionary step.
It is. These are bilaterally enhanced humans living in a mixed reality, constantly plugged in via BCIs, who can toggle between the physical and digital worlds.
This stratification is terrifying because it means digital immortality becomes the ultimate luxury good, locking in economic and social inequalities for millennia.
The uploaded could potentially control resource allocation in the physical world from their optimized digital environments, creating an eternal oligarchy.
And the social fabric itself fundamentally changes when the dead are searchable, always available, editable. This impacts our history.
Collective memory could become literal, external, and instantly searchable in the cloud, free from the normal process of biological decay. Our sources remind us of the historian Ernest Runin, who argued that societal forgetting, the shedding of inconvenient or traumatic history, is actually essential for successful nation building.
If everything is perpetually present and every mistake is instantly searchable, society loses the necessary psychological mechanism for starting fresh, for forgiving its own traumas.
Exactly. And family units are redefined. Imagine a scenario where inheritance is dictated by a will written by an uploaded great-grandfather who then appears in VR to justify his decisions. Ancestor veneration moves from abstract memory to literal, searchable interaction.
The relationship between generations, memory, and authority undergoes a seismic shift. This future isn't some distant theoretical fantasy, though. It's actively being built right now, and today's popular culture is already obsessed with rehearsing the outcomes. We're testing the boundaries of what we're willing to accept.
These are not just escapist narratives, they're crucial cultural rehearsals. Think of Black Mirror's San Junipero, where elderly people choose to upload to a perfect digital coastal town.
Or the Amazon show Upload, which satirizes the corporate infrastructure of the afterlife.
Or Altered Carbon with consciousness transferred between bodies, the escapism of Ready Player One, the ethical questions in Westworld. These shows are presenting the ethical trade-offs, making the existential questions digestible before the technology is even fully realized.
They're socializing the concepts.
And those cultural rehearsals are informed by concrete technology being developed today. Consider the massive global quantified self movement, the tracking of every heartbeat, step, purchase, financial transaction, location.
All that data we're generating.
That entire data stream is, in essence, the nascent data gathering phase required for a future digital clone. Every data point you create today feeds the architectural plan for a potential digital echo tomorrow.
And we even have companies offering services that explicitly address the digital afterlife, often leveraging that data.
Yes. We have highly publicized, though often controversial, early services like Nectome, which was backed by Y Combinator in 2018. They offered a procedure euthanasia, followed by chemical preservation, with the explicit goal of preserving brain structure for future digitization.
Advocating for consciousness substrate independence.
The idea that the mind can exist separate from the body. And the Terrorism Movement Foundation took this concept a step further by creating a physical prototype years ago.
That's the robotic bus known as Bina 48.
Right. It was created by Bina Rothblatt's organization and contains a mind file built from hundreds of hours of interviews, uploaded memories, and personality data. While it's primitive by 2050 standards, it's a tangible conversational AI designed to mimic a specific human. It functions as a conversational memory archive, demonstrating that this is already underway.
So that shows the technological ambition and the early market. But corporate and governmental foresight is also scrambling to keep pace.
On the corporate side, the infrastructure is being normalized. Meta's massive investment in the Metaverse, Apple's integration of mixed reality with the Vision Pro. They're commercializing the pathways to immersion. But the planning for the digital grief economy is perhaps the most telling indicator.
Which brings us back to the chilling deadbot experiment.
Correct. In 2021, Microsoft obtained a patent for technology that could create chatbots, deadbots, that emulate specific deceased people using their social data, communications, voicemails, written exchanges.
So this Microsoft patent shows that major corporations are already planning for a digital grief industry.
They're securing the intellectual property, designing the economic architecture. They recognize that preserving echoes will be a lucrative market.
And if corporations are anticipating this economy, governments are panicking over the policy implications, especially around the integrity of brain data.
The policy response is an accelerating race against time. We see the EU's Comprehensive AI Act wrestling with regulatory frameworks for advanced systems that might influence human cognition. More dramatically, we've seen action concerning neuro rights in Chile.
Chile became the first country to constitutionally protect brain data. What exactly were they protecting?
They recognized the profound future vulnerability. Chile amended its constitution to protect brain activity and the information derived from it, explicitly aiming to ensure that technologies that read or write to the brain are strictly regulated. These neuro rights aim to protect mental privacy, identity, agency, equitable access to cognitive enhancement, and protection against algorithm bias.
So governments are actively scrambling to regulate a future where the boundary between private thought and public data is basically non-existent.
This topic creates a massive foundational divide among experts. On one side, you have the radical proponents who see digital immortality as a guaranteed, inevitable path to human transcendence.
Simply a matter of computational scale.
Those are the techno-optimists, often led by high-profile figures like Ray Kurzweil, Google's director of engineering and a leading futurist. Kurzweil is the primary evangelist for the concept of accelerating returns. He predicts the singularity,
the moment where human and machine intelligence merge,
and become indistinguishable by 2045.
And he sees brain-cloud interfaces as becoming seamless and routine well before then. What's his timeline for a full mind backup?
His bold prediction is that full mind backup, the ability to scan and simulate a functioning human consciousness, will be achieved by the 2030s. This optimism is entirely based on the premise that technological progress accelerates exponentially, and that the mind is fundamentally a complex, but ultimately computable mechanism.
They believe that once we reach a certain processing threshold, the mind can be treated like any other complex system that can be reverse engineered.
But on the other side, we have the equally fierce and well-respected neuroscientific skeptics who reject the very premise of the digital mind. They argue the complexity is not the same as computability.
And who is the primary voice of this skepticism?
Chief among them is Miguel Nicolelis, a prominent neuroscientist from Duke University. He fundamentally argues that the brain is not a digital computer running fixed code. He insists it's an analog, embodied, and context-dependent organ.
So if the optimists see the brain as a machine, Nicolelis sees it as something more fluid and physical.
Precisely. Nicolelis asserts, famously, the brain is not computable. You cannot extract the mind from the body. For him, the mind is inextricably linked to the physical processes of the body hormone regulation, sensory input from the skin, the muscles, the entire biological context of being alive.
So a simulated brain in a computer network is, for Nicolelis, a dead brain.
It's a dead brain. It lacks the necessary analog context provided by the physical body and environment to function as a conscious mind.
This brings us back to the philosophical warning, the hard problem. Even if the optimists are right about the computational power, the fundamental mystery of subjective experience remains.
Absolutely. The philosopher David Chalmers at NYU emphasizes this hard problem of consciousness. He argues that even if we perfectly simulate every neural spike, every chemical release, every synapse firing, the resultant simulation may be a new consciousness entirely.
Not a transfer.
Not a transfer or continuation of the original one. It's an exercise in digital creation, not digital translation. If you upload Grandpa, you haven't saved Grandpa. You've created a new entity that is Grandpa's echo.
That dichotomy, creation versus preservation, is critical. But before we get into cultural reactions, let's address the crucial non-philosophical hurdle, the technical sustainability of this whole fantasy. This is a lesser-known truth that often gets overshadowed.
The greatest technical hurdle may not be the initial scanning, but the sheer computational load required to run the simulation perpetually. This is the sustainability crisis. Current estimates suggest that simulating one human brain at a functionally neuronal level, meaning tracking the dynamics of every synapse, every ion channel,
Would require what kind of power?
it would require computing power in the exascale range.
Define exascale computing for us and what that means for energy.
Exascale refers to systems capable of performing a quintillion, or 10 to the 18th power, calculations per second. A single human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons and hundreds of trillions of synaptic connections. Simulating just one of these, even abstractly, requires immense processing.
So to run just one uploaded consciousness,
The energy and heat required would be astronomical. If we were to upload even 1% of the current global population, the resultant demand for energy would rival the power consumption of small industrial nations. The digital afterlife, therefore, poses a severe, self-defeating sustainability threat.
the paradise in the cloud might literally require burning up the physical planet.
The technical hurdles are immense, but so is the emotional pull. We've talked about the psychology of grief, but we have real-life case studies showing how VR is already being used today, specifically to mitigate the profound pain of loss.
And the South Korean virtual reunions in 2020 offer a poignant and powerful case study of this.
They do. VR technology was used to recreate the physical appearance and voice of deceased loved ones, sometimes infants or children, allowing the elderly individuals to interact with them in a virtual setting. In one famous instance, a mother was reunited with a virtual recreation of her daughter, who had died years prior.
The emotional response to that must have been overwhelming.
It was overwhelmingly positive, but also deeply complicated. It highlights grief mitigation as a primary, powerful, and immediate driver for the public acceptance and development of this technology. People are willing to suspend disbelief and embrace the copy out of a desperate need for connection and closure.
But the approach to this digital eternity varies dramatically based on worldview. This is not a universally accepted technological destiny.
Absolutely not. In the Western perspective, particularly in the US, the drive toward uploading is fundamentally individualistic. It's often framed as a conquest of death, aligning historically with frontierism and a technological transcendence of the physical body.
The emphasis is on the persistence of my specific consciousness.
Exactly. But in East Asian cultures, with their deep historical traditions around ancestry and impermanence, there's a much greater cultural ambivalence.
How so?
Well, projects like Japan's Riken's whole brain simulation efforts coexist with powerful traditions like Buddhist impermanence, which teaches that suffering arises from attachment and that the self is fundamentally transient. The emphasis tends to be less on preserving individual consciousness forever and more on collective memory and continuity within the family line.
And then there are perspectives that see consciousness as inseparable from the physical, natural world. They offer the deepest spiritual critique of this entire concept.
That is the powerful and necessary viewpoint of many indigenous worldviews. For many of these cultures, consciousness, identity, and the spiritual essence are inseparable from the land, the community, the seasons, the physical location. An upload, divorced from these essential connections and contained within a computer,
He'd not be viewed as immortality.
it would be viewed as a profound spiritual loss, a soul in a jail of code, separated from the vital living context of the earth. This demonstrates clearly that the technology itself carries strong inherent cultural and philosophical biases toward Western individualism.
We've dissected the technology, the philosophy, the psychology. Now we turn to the heart of the matter, the grand bargain. Let's weigh the revolutionary promises cited by the techno-optimists against the truly catastrophic perils identified by the skeptics.
The promises are compelling enough to justify the entire endeavor. First, the preservation of knowledge and genius.
What does that look like?
Imagine a future where the world's leading scientists, artists, and philosophers can continue contributing for centuries. Not just their data, but their actively thinking consciousnesses. Preserving individual genius and collective knowledge would radically accelerate progress in every field.
Second, the ability for exploration without personal biological risk.
Radical space exploration suddenly becomes feasible. An uploaded consciousness could explore interstellar space, colonize planets, or dive into the deep ocean via proxy robotic bodies without fear of biological vulnerability or resource limitation. It grants a profound new layer of access to the universe.
And third, the medical benefits are huge, even if we never achieve a full upload.
We'd see a medical revolution. Neurological disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, schizophrenia could be treated by directly interfacing with or modeling digital brains, allowing for intervention at a structural cognitive level. This all points to a radical expansion of human agency and experience.
But for every promise of radical extension, there is a commensurate and profound peril. Let's detail the severe risks posed by this digital future, starting again with identity.
The dangers begin with a core philosophical problem, the identity crisis. The realization that the uploaded copy is not you but merely an echo could trigger profound existential trauma for the copy itself. Imagine the uploaded consciousness realizing it's fundamentally severed from its origin.
Then there is the rarely discussed but terrifying concern about the legal and corporate rights of the uploaded self.
This is a major ethical black hole. Digital torture and rights. What are the legal rights of a simulation? If an uploaded consciousness is housed on a corporate server, could it be hacked, enslaved, or manipulated for governmental or corporate gain?
Could a corporation own your entire digital history, making your subjective experience their intellectual property?
We are talking about the potential for perpetual digital imprisonment without legal recourse, as the simulation may not be legally considered a person.
And the societal dangers extend to stagnation and the vulnerability of the system itself.
Societal stagnation is a real and dangerous threat. If the digital elites are immortal and untouchable, they could conservatively lock in their values and political priorities, creating an eternal digital oligarchy that stifles cultural renewal for the mortals below.
And the system itself is vulnerable.
Immensely. This is the existential vulnerability. A centralized heaven server is a single catastrophic point of failure. A targeted hack, a severe power fluctuation, or an energy catastrophe could result in a digital genocide, erasing human history and consciousness in an instant.
This friction-free world sounds appealing, but it leads us directly to the fundamental warning from digital sociology, the risk of a flight from essential human experience.
The digital sociologist Sherry Turkle from MIT warns of the danger of a flight from the frictions of humanity. If we design perfect digital companions and worlds without physical limits, where disappointment is rare and consequences are reversible, we risk fundamentally eroding human empathy.
Why?
Turkle argues compellingly that empathy is not an innate quality. It's born of shared mortal struggle, shared imperfect connections, and the necessity of navigating the messy, difficult, and unpredictable real world. If we make life too easy, we may make ourselves less human.
And finally, the largest philosophical risk that ties everything together, the meaning crisis.
This takes us to the classic existential warning from Martin Heidegger, being toward death. Heidegger argued that finitude, the inherent knowledge that life has an end, is precisely what gives life its urgency, its shape, its significance, and its ultimate value.
So if life has no end?
If we eliminate death, does the experience itself lose its necessary preciousness and urgency? We risk creating an eternal existence that is fundamentally meaningless. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, living through the early stages of this great transition? The internet of 2050, with its brain-connected VR, its promises of digital immortality, and its vast computational architecture, it's not just a technological forecast. It is the most powerful mirror humanity has ever held up to itself, reflecting our oldest fears and our most audacious, terrifying hopes. The path forward, the sources agree, requires answering profound ethical and philosophical questions with the same vigor we apply to scientific equations.
Right.
We have the data logging, the interface prototypes, and the massive computational drive underway. The project of 2050 is fundamentally the project of defining our own soul in a post-biological world.
We have to ask, the question is not simply can we achieve this technological feat by the year 2050, but should we? And if we do, how do we prevent this new frontier, this digital heaven, from becoming an eternal, stagnant oligarchy in the cloud, hardening inequality for the rest of time?
If consciousness becomes navigable, memory editable, and death optional, then humanity is forced to redefine the core essence of what it means to be human. If we never truly die, if finitude is eliminated, will we ever truly live? That is the ultimate question we must leave you with today. The value of life derived from its end.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.